motivational workout. Jay-Z has been working closely with the NFL on its social justice initiatives since early August. And we're now joined by professor and author Michael Eric Dyson, who has recently written a book on Jay-Z. This is awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's really good to have you with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here, always.
It's always a pleasure to have you. You're one of my favorites, if not my favorite.
Thank you, sir.
So is Jay-Z.
Yes.
And obviously, we all know now that he has a role with the NFL. How much of a role did he have in prompting that quote-unquote and finally ill-fated workout that Colin had in Atlanta?
He made all the difference. I mean, we know for 3 years Colin Kaepernick has been out of work unjustly, unfairly denied opportunity to exercise his craft and ply his wares on a gridiron for no other reason than he took a knee to protest racial oppression, black suffering, and the trauma that black people endured. That's clear. But it's also clear that the NFL had made no gestures toward reconciliation, not finding a way to do so. Jay-Z's presence made all the difference in the world, negotiating behind the scenes. This is what I tell people. You protest outside, you raise the concern, you tell people what's wrong. When they say, well, how do we change it? You got to go inside and help negotiate that. Jay-Z did just that. First, he was on a song saying, tell the NFL, we're in stadiums too. We don't need you to appear there. And he wore a Kaepernick jersey. Now, people said, is he selling out? No, he's understanding the transition between Starsky and Hutch, Batman and Robin, inside, outside, Steph Curry and LeBron on the inside. So he then goes inside to negotiate, to say, create space and opportunity for this unjustly aggrieved young man and give him that opportunity. So he was deeply and profoundly involved. Without Jay-Z, I suspect the opportunity would not exist.
And furthermore, how disappointed was Jay-Z from what you hear and how it did not turn out?
He's definitely disappointed. Disappointed because, not because Colin Kaepernick doesn't have a righteous grievance. He does. Not because he wasn't the victim of collusion. He was. Not because his cause was not just, but because strategy is just as critical at some points as the substance of your argument. And I'm from an older generation, right? I'm 61 years old. And I know that younger black people sometimes think, well, it is unfair to have to do certain things. Like when the police stop us, is it fair that young black men in particular and young black women have to behave in a different fashion than their counterparts? No, it's not fair, but it's real. So Jay-Z understands, as I do from an older generation, strategically, you got to figure out your way. You can't get a freedom scholarship from Pharaoh's school. Pharaoh ain't in the business of making free men. Pharaoh's in the business of making slaves. So you understand that from the get-go, and you have a different expectation. So you use your position to challenge the authorities in such a fashion. I think Colin Kaepernick, who is an amazingly iconic and heroic figure, also perhaps could have used some strategy sessions where you figure out, you don't have to show up in a shirt that says Kunta Kinte. Now, that's your freedom. That's your freedom to do so. But, you know, you can go on a ship that is helmed by a captain, and you can liberate that ship and say, I now am the captain, and throw the captain overboard. But you've liberated yourself into bondage if you don't know where you're going. Now, it is not that he doesn't know where he was going, but to extend the analogy, Colin Kaepernick might have said, let me try a Disney shirt. Let me go in with, hey, boys and girls, I'm Americana, and get in there like Samson, since we both, all of us read the Bible, and then destroy the pillars from within. Figure out a way to penetrate to the heart of the matter and then leverage the authority you have and do what you have to do. So it doesn't have to be either or, but both and. I just think the strategy might have been beefed up a bit in consultation with others.
You just echoed what I said when Skip and I have been talking about this since this has transpired. And then it seems like he was so combative. NFL, you've been running. NFL, you've been hiding. At that point in time, you want to come off as a sympathetic figure, not as a combative figure, as a militant figure. And I agree with you, the shirt. Why? Look, if I'm going for a job interview, I can dress any kind of way I want to. But the likelihood of me dressing a certain type of a way, they're looking at that.
It is, and it's unfair. I mean, if Aaron Rodgers shows up with that, that's fine. And so you're not Aaron Rodgers at this point. You're not Tom Brady at this point. So the reality is you're on the outside trying to get in. You've been unjustly put out. Let's understand. We understand it's difficult
about it.
But at the same time, you know what the deal is. Don't expect a certain kind of outcome that you know is already not forthcoming. You use everything to your advantage to give them no excuse. There is nothing you can say to me. I'm not going to antagonize them. It is, after all, a job tryout. about.
Right.
And at that level, you got to understand, whether fair or not, those are the rules. And that's what I tell my son. You show up under the conditions that are demanded by the people from whom you seek employment. And then when you get in there, you can change the rules from within and you can alter the situation. But in the meantime, you got to play the game that's before. You got to deal with the defense gives you.
Right.
Okay. Was it possible that by that point, Colin was so discouraged about the battle over what the conditions would be, over the agreement he was going to have to sign, that he protested by wearing the T-shirt?
Of course, I can understand that, but it's self-sabotage at that level, right? The thing is that, look, he's a young man, 29 years old. Let me even be more frank. I was at an event with Tyler Perry out in Atlanta where he opened his studios. Fantastic. And Kaepernick comes up to me and says, you know, I need to straighten you out. I said, fine. You know, a lot of people around me, oh, my God, you're Michael Eric Dyson. I said, I ain't got no ego. I understand what this is. I said, sir, but this is the thing, Mr. Kaepernick. You have my number. You use my number to get me to retweet your post, but when I'm asking you for substance and engagement and conversation, ain't forthcoming. Now, I said, people pay me a lot of money to talk. I'm doing it for free because I love you and love your cause. So it has to be both ends. It has to be some give and take. And I think there, substantively, again, if he's willing and able to get other people, bigger brains, brighter minds, who are equally invested in his heroic achievements and want to extend it, strategy is critical. Martin Luther King Jr. got beat in 1961 in Albany, Georgia. He went there, and that old wily sheriff said, you know, two things. First of all, I ain't going to be violent. I ain't gonna do that. I'm not gonna be beating you over the head. And secondly, I'm going to separate you. I'm not gonna put a bunch of black people in one jail. I've spread them across the counties. So you won't have these singings at night and these camp meetings and people see you. King learned from that in 1963, Birmingham, Alabama. Strategy. Let me see. If America is eating its dinner and it sees that black people are being washed against the wall and bicuspids and incisors of police dogs are ripping into the flesh of women and children, that will dramatically and theatrically communicate a message that I've been trying to preach for a long time. And so in Birmingham, when that occurred, the change was set in play, and in 1964, the Civil Rights Act came about, 65, the Voting Rights Act, because of Selma, and that is a result of strategy. It doesn't mean that you're a sellout. It means that you understand the enemy you're dealing with, the opponent that you're dealing with. And let me be even more honest. I was riding the NFL, getting into them hard, because I believe in fairness, and I've been riding with Colin from the beginning, and I still do. But then when I saw the contracts, it's not what necessarily was presented to be, right? Colin was very concerned about the NFL, rightfully so, manipulating the footage so that it could show that he was like messing up. So they said, we're going to put your director right next to Art. Then they offered to give him the raw footage. At that level, you just got to step up into the arena and represent. And I love him. And I want to have that kind of conversation with him, not with you on air. But it's difficult. And let me say finally this. Jumping on Malcolm Jenkins? Eric Reed, whom I love and adore too. Even if he calls me a sellout, I don't care. I love those guys. But calling Malcolm Jenkins a sellout because he decided to take the $89 million that the NFL gave, hold it. Listen to what you're saying. The NFL owners, who we know as a bunch are rascals, who we know as a bunch have been insensitive to the call and predicament of black people, right? But they then made a shift and said, we're going to give you $89 million to give toward black organizations and other organizations that you point out that are significant. Malcolm Jenkins is equally heroic because he's dealing with what? Stand your ground laws. They're talking about charging young men as young ladies as adults who are children. They're working on the mechanics. So in other words, Colin Kaepernick kneels to highlight situations that are unjust. Malcolm Jenkins is taking the baton to change sports and then running further with it to show what we can do. To call him a sellout because he has a different way, you got a Malcolm and Martin the game. You got a Starsky and Hutch the game.
But that's what you get. It's almost like if you don't agree with every step that Kaepernick takes, you're a sellout, you're a coon.
That's crazy.
I mean, it is so ridiculous. And like Jay-Z, they call Jay-Z a sellout because Jay-Z said, we're beyond kneeling now.
Right.
Oh, you sellout.
Right.
Oh, okay, we're kneeling. Okay, we were kneeling to get the attention.
Right.
Okay, now that we have their attention, okay, now what's the next step?
That's what he was saying. You know, people took that wrongly. I think when they said, he said, oh, we're burning. Because if you look at the tape of the same conference that he had, right, the meeting there, he says, of course protest. Of course continue to do what you do. But his point was, kneeling is the first step. When you got kindling to start a fire, it's just the first step on the kindling. Kneeling is the kindling. Now you got to get to burning the big wood. Come on.
Put the logs on there.
You got to put the logs on the fire, as Grace Jones would say.
So was that the unfortunate end of Colin Kaepernick as we knew and loved him as a football player?
You know, unfortunately and tragically, it may be. And leaders often make sacrifices, right? I don't want to, exaggerate the nature of the sacrifice, but it is his career. People kept saying, why doesn't he just go do something else? Because that's what he loves to do, right? I love to speak. I love to write. I love to think. You guys love, and this wonderful woman love to engage in serious and critical analysis of sports. That's what you love to do. That's what you're born to do. And Colin feels that, and I understand that. But unfortunately and tragically, because of circumstances, it may be that this stage of his career is over. But look, Dick Gregory was a great comedian. But at some level, Dick Gregory said, I got to stop telling jokes because I have to get on the front line. Colin Kaepernick has been forced, perhaps coerced into this position. But Martin Luther King Jr. said, the battering rams of historical necessity have thrust me into that, quoting the great theologian Reinhold Niebuhr. So now Colin Kaepernick is in a position, and let's be even more blunt. The thing is that he was 1 in 11, 1 in 10 in his last 11 starts. So he's still better than a lot of quarterbacks out there playing right now. He could definitely play. But we know that given his talent level is extraordinary, but in his skills, but in terms of the outcomes from his games, right, he was in the middle of the pack. But now, as a heroic figure, now as an icon, he reigns supreme for a lot longer than you can play quarterback in the NFL. I know Tom Brady, Mr. Magic, is doing it at 42.